code anymore, so there's no code in this talk. That's a lie, there is actually code in this talk. And I'm getting, oh my god, that's really loud. You can turn me down. Yeah, because I'm going to shout and I'm going to deafen everybody. Yeah, okay, yeah, cool. Thank you. Hi, how are we all doing? Have we had a great day? I think we have. I'm just trying to set my sound levels whilst you're here. I'm Ruth. This is the part of the talk where I tell you where I'm from, what I do, that, you know, I've been working for a massive company for like 100 years and all this kind of stuff. I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm going to show you what I do because I think that's a little bit easier. What a great first day. We have seen so many things. I've seen a few things, custom properties. I'm going to talk about them a little bit, but I'm really glad that we had a really, really good in-depth talk because I only talk about them like that much, and Leah spoke about them that much, so that's great. Web components, big fan of web components. React and Angular together, which was crazy, but very cool. Flow was in there. There were loads and loads of stuff. There's going to be loads more stuff tomorrow. All really, really good. And then I'm going to come in and talk to you about how to be a web AV artist. What? Yeah, I know. It's literally the most random thing and completely impractical, right? Because I really struggle with the practicality of this talk. Like every single talk we had was full of information. You can go back into work on Monday and be all full of knowledge and be a much better coder, and I come along and I'm going to talk to you about things like MIDI, and you're going to be like, how am I going to use MIDI in my website? I know, right? So it's fine. I've done something within the talk to make sure it's definitely a practical talk. Has anybody seen this Venn diagram? So this is what people talk about in conference talks and what makes a practical conference talk. Can you see that there's no overlap, right? So I took this quite seriously because I was like, I've got to make this a practical conference talk. I want there to be takeaways. I definitely don't want it to be something that I just talk about and everybody's like, ah, that was rubbish. So I've made two lists based on this Venn diagram of things that I have to include in the talk to make it useful, and things that I have to avoid, because then it won't be useful at all, right? Now, you are my audience, you've got to make sure that I definitely do these things. So things to avoid, things I'm not allowed to talk about: analytics, operational excellence, chat ops, orchestration. Definitely can avoid those, right? They sound like great things to talk about. Not. I've got to include these things: duct tape, workarounds, bike shedding, and coffee. Right? So keep an eye out. We have to make this list happen. Useful talk coming up. Now I've got that out of the way. Let's begin. What the hell is a web AV artist? What's an AV artist? AV stands for audio visual, right? So this is making visuals to audio. So it's a lot more sort of making and creating animations and visuals in time with audio. It's not so much about the actual making of audio. Another name for this is a VJ. So you might have been to clubs, you might have heard DJs, you might have seen projections. The person doing the projections is usually called a VJ. Who remembers, I'm hoping I've still got, I'm worried about my sound levels. Who remembers this?
Winamp. It really whips the lot.
Yes, I've got people that actually put their hand up. Oh yeah, I remember. Cool, yeah, I know. For those of you that don't remember it because you were actually born at a reasonable time and you're not super old like me, this is the best MP3 player of all time. It's a piece of software, not a piece of hardware. And we kind of used to use it when we actually owned MP3 files. Like, we didn't stream them, we actually owned them. And we used to play them through this piece of software. It's a nice, lightweight, free piece of software. But this wasn't the best thing about Winamp. No, the best thing about Winamp was this. It had this visualization engine. Yeah, people are remembering this. So you used to play all your music, and then it used to have this viewer, and you could fire up the viewer and then just watch these animations go in time with your music. And that was how we kind of spent our college years. They were not wasted at all. Probably the most influential thing of any VJ of my generation. And I thought this was great. And back when I was at uni, we used to use native software to create visualizations like this in the club. But recently I kind of thought, could we do that in a browser? We've got all these tools at our disposal now, like why not? Funny enough, little breaking tip, yes we can, I will go through some techniques that will enable us all to do it, which is great. The first thing that we need, and probably the most important thing, even though we're making visuals, is actually the sound. And we need to make sure that we have sound, because without it we can't make visuals go in time with the sound. And we can get sound with the audio API. There's 4 sort of main ways you deal with sound with the Web Audio API. The first one is you can create it. So it actually comes with an oscillator, which will create a sound wave, so you can actually create your own sound. Probably not useful in our case, but it's there. You can grab it from the DOM. If you've got an audio or a video element sitting in your HTML, you can grab the source of that, and you can take the audio and put that into the audio API. You can stream it. So this is a really interesting one. You can take the media stream API and take the sound from your camera or your microphone on your device and pop that into the audio API and use it that way. Or you can just grab a file. You can go and grab a file and take the data from the file and use sound that way. So I've got 2 ways which I think are interesting and what we want to use it for. This one, this is taking a sound file and treating visuals off the sound file. And then the other one, pretty much the same visualization, it's actually picking up on my laptop's microphone. And I'm streaming the sound in. So when I'm talking, it's up. When we're quiet, it's down. Which is cool. This is my preferred method at the moment, because if I take my laptop into venues, I don't really have any way of like piping the audio in. I don't really know what the DJ is going to be playing or the band. So this is the method that I use. I just pick up on the ambient noise in the area that I'm in. Cool. Okay, so you've got sound, but we need to be able to analyze that sound. Oh yeah, I wasn't allowed to talk about analytics. It's okay, we've still got a whole talk. It's fine, I can still get all of this stuff in, it's cool. I'm not worried, okay. So we need to be able to analyze that sound. Thank you, talk. We can also do that with the Web Audio API. It's got some analyzer functionality, which is great. So you can analyze the sort of timing of the track that you've got within the API, or you can analyze the frequency, which is the most interesting one with me. So frequency is sort of low sounds and high sounds and everything in between. And the way that that's returned for us, it's a nice little bit of code here, is we create an array, and each item in that array represents a different frequency. We can make that array as big or as small as we want, and that will basically set the resolution of the sort of data that we get back. And then what you get within each item is the amplitude value of that frequency. So if you've got a high value, like say you've got the low sounds at the bottom here and the high sounds at the top there, this low item here, we've got some low sounds playing, then that amplitude is going to be higher, and that number in that item of the array is going to be higher. Cool, glad you're all still with me. So for something like this, it's basically just an array with that data. And I'm just creating an I element in the DOM for every single item of that array, and then just setting the height with the data that I'm getting back. So the bigger the amplitude, the higher the element is going to be. Pretty simple stuff. Some vanilla JS, just doing a loop over it, setting the heights. We can all create visuals. We're done. Let's go and have a beer. Yeah. Awesome. We can do more than that. So I sort of did this quite a while ago, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we kind of just kept adding it and trying new things and seeing how far we could push this. Bearing in mind I already had a little bit of knowledge from using native software and kind of knowing where I wanted to go with this. But with anything that you kind of want to experiment with, you also want some inspiration. So this is my first inspiration. This is Bridget Riley. She's a super cool artist, it said so on the slide. And she sort of paints these amazing, all we have to do is just dump stuff in the DOM and then change some values with it. So this is just a bunch of sort of divs set out with Flexbox, and I'm just changing the width based on the data that I'm getting back. Pretty trippy, but pretty cool. This one's very similar. I'm using that nice triangle border hack we've probably all used in CSS by now. And then I'm just changing the opacity. So if I go quiet, it'll go away. And if I go loud again, it'll come back. And this is just chucking stuff at the DOM and playing it with that. The thing is that then you get to start playing with all the nice new niceties that we have that we don't necessarily get to play with in our day jobs. This kind of is my day job, so I do Transforms, CSS transforms, that was cool. I was thinking symmetry is a nice thing when you're doing visuals. So I was like, could I take whatever is in the DOM and then sort of reflect and rotate it just with one function? Like grab this out and then duplicate it. Yeah, we can do that. That's cool. So that makes a nice sort of symmetry thing. Again, this is just some my elements, just moving to do with the data. The thing is, with something like this, you sort of go, huh, can I put a GIF in? Yeah, I can put a GIF in. Specifically My Little Pony GIFs. All very, very suitable for projections in clubs, My Little Ponies. Transforms are cool. We've got filters and blend modes now. I don't know whether anybody's started using these. These are great. If anybody's used Photoshop, so you've always had that layering effects. Where you get to put blend modes and you can see the layer below them. That's great. Filters are things like being able to invert stuff, desaturate it so it's black and white, sort of adding it so it's brighter and stuff like that. That's all great for effects on the DOM that we're already using. This is a visualization I put together for JSConf.eu. It's a bunch of SVGs actually. You can use blend modes on SVGs if you didn't know. And instead of just having flat SVGs, I have put a blend mode on them so you can see the ones behind. And I think that that makes a much more richer visualization. As I said, I was going to touch on this. Custom properties. It's a lovely new CSS thing. Leah talked about it at the end of her talk. What I like to use this for is with JavaScript. So we've got our data in JavaScript, and then we can update that. We can use that data and then update a custom property that we set in our CSS in real time. So I've got a level custom property here, which is the sort of, I'm going to think that that's the analyzing data that I'm getting back. And then I sort of set that as the width and height on an element in CSS. And then in my JavaScript, I'm going to change that level custom property to be the frequency data that I'm getting back. And that is actually going to change the width and height of the things in the DOM for me. It's like JavaScript all up in your CSS. It's kind of crazy, right? This is an example of all those things together, right? So we've got some transforms going on, we've got some blend modes in there, we're doing some custom properties, setting the widths and heights and the rest of it. You might notice it's a little bit janky. It doesn't really like operating properly. Oh, right, I'm not allowed to talk about operational excellence. I'm going to pass that one over. Well, whatever, thank God. And this is the thing about sort of chucking stuff at the DOM and changing all this stuff. It doesn't really like performing very well. This is my friend Ben. I was chatting to Ben. Not allowed to talk about chat ops. Can you see where this is going? It's all right. It's fine. I've still got a lot of time to get in things like duct tape. I promise you I will. If you don't take anything else away from this talk, my top tip is talk to your friends. Even if you're not just sort of rubber duckying, it's really nice just to chat to them and see what they think about the thing that you're building. I was actually talking to him about interactive installation that I was doing. It was sort of the visualization stuff, but I was using some of the same techniques. And he was saying, well, hey, look, you're throwing stuff at the DOM, you're drawing them, you're using data. Have you thought about using d3.js? Now, I'm somebody who doesn't really use libraries until I've given it a lot of consideration, but he did have a point. I mean, when we think about D3, we think about sort of pie charts and bar charts and sort of things like that, but it is a data visualization library, and I am working with data, working with music, analysing data. The other thing about D3 is it does work with the DOM a lot better. It's a lot cleaner to do stuff like that. It's good at maths. I am working with numbers. I'm actually doing quite a bit of maths. And I can start using SVGs quite easily, which is just nicer. It just looks nicer than a DOM element because it's painting better. And so I was like, okay, yeah, all right, I'll try this. Let's try some more experiments. My inspiration for my next set of experiments. This is a book called Supergraphic by Tim Leong. It's actually really nice. It just charts data from comics and graphic novels. And you can just flick through it. It's just got some really lovely sort of data viz sort of in it. So I thought that this is really good inspiration for what I'm doing. And I can start to do things like this simple sunburst. just picking up on my voice and just moving around. It's very simple, but it already is performing better and it looks cleaner because now we're drawing SVGs. Same thing, like there's quite a few examples of these. This one's just moving around. This one is sort of reimagining the analyzer from earlier. So we've got circles rather than lines, and also some flowers, because I think that's quite nice. D3 very cleverly just takes every item in the array for me, and you just create a shape, hence why all the visuals are very much like just replicas of shapes as you sort of draw them round or draw them into arcs and things like that. The thing about the data, though, it's something that I want to address. I think the analysis that we get back with the Audio API could be better. And I'm going to explain this. Last time you need to engage brain today, I promise. This is an array of frequency amplitudes. It's basically an array of numbers. And our frequencies that we are actually getting back run from 0 hertz, super low, to 20,000 hertz, right? 20 kilohertz. That's super high. Now, we can hear 20,000 hertz, sort of. I'm a little bit old, I can't. But for the most part, that is not what music plays. So, for instance, a musical keyboard sits here on that scale. So there's actually a lot of high values up here which music isn't really going to use. Bear in mind that I'm not trying to pick up on actual notes. I am just trying to make pretty visualizations. So I think we can just make this data a bit better for those pretty visualizations. The other thing to note about this is the gaps that we're getting back are equal, which is fine, but that's not how music works. This is a keyboard, I'm sure you've all seen one, and these are notes called A on a keyboard. Now they're an octave apart. The purple one is lower than the orange one, but they sort of sit very much in harmony. That's why they're both called A. If you play them together, they sync very, very nicely. Frequency-wise, the orange one runs at 440 hertz. The purple one below it runs at 220 hertz. That's a gap of 220 hertz. Cool. The thing with the green one is, though, even though the gap on the piano is the same, it actually runs at 880 hertz. So the gap's actually now 440 hertz. The gap's actually doubled. And it does keep doing that. And that's the way that music works. So the array that we have doesn't really make too much sense in the fact that it's equal. It should be a better sort of log spread. So we take the data from the Audio API. I can just chuck off that bit. I don't want that top bit at all. I want to keep this bit. This is the bit that I'm interested in. And I kind of also want to spread it out to give it a better spread. Cool. Glad you're all still with me. Yeah, I did that. Awesome. Should we talk through it? No, I'm not going to talk through that code. It's actually on GitHub. If you do ever want to do some analysing of audio and you want some better analysing, I just stuck this function up here for you all. To make a better, more visualising way of you seeing this, this is a before. So this stuff on the right, if I speak a little bit louder into it, there you go. You can see it's quite sort of right heavy. This is where the array sort of starts, and this is where all the data is held. So that's before I run this function. This is the same visualization after I've run the function. You can see that the spread is better, and it's actually giving us a much better. I think the visualization is nicer, and it also means that the data is going to be better. Now, this is actually really good in terms of things like beat detection. If you want to do detection just on like low frequencies and mid frequencies and high frequencies, like things like bass detection, this is going to be better if we start with the data like this. Hence why we sort of go through that process. And that is going to be something that we can use later in our visualizations. Now, I know you're thinking, I'm still using SVGs, and I'm still putting things in the DOM. What about Canvas? I mean, that seems to be a much more suitable thing for this. The thing with SVGs is it was really, really nice to use them. It was nice to learn. The problem I was getting was when I was chucking loads more shapes, and those shapes were being drawn and redrawn, performance was taking a hit. And so I did quite recently just change everything over to use Canvas. And you can chuck loads of shapes at the canvas. Oh my goodness me. And it's still just like, hey, this is super cool. I'm totally running and everything's great. I don't have a lot of examples of this because I've only just started doing it. And I'm going to do something which isn't in the talk, and I'm hoping this is going to work. Don't ever do any live demos. I did something on the plane. Let's see if that's running. Yeah! Canvas gives you 3D. So yay! We've got some 3D visualization. There's just some cubes going on. That little flashing that you see here, still going on and off. I've still got some tweaking to do. That's actually a CSS filter invert going on, just on the actual canvas element, because you can use filters on canvas, which is a lovely effect. So we're just building up all these things that we've been using, which is great. Cool. We've got visuals. Great. I did Codevember last year. If you want to see some of those and see the actual code behind them, they're all on CodePen. Chances are I'll do that again this year. It's basically when you try and code something every single day in November. Every single day is a bit much. I think I ended up with about 20. They are just experiments, because obviously I was trying to see which ways working, which ways weren't working, and just having fun. This year, because I just started with Canvas, we just started doing some more stuff with effects, things like glitch and inverting and beat control and things like that. I'm hoping I can pull some of that into this as well and do a lot more stuff with 3D, which is going to be great. Fingers crossed. But they are there, so you can go and check them out. So the thing is, you actually do this in a club, and I'll get to that in a minute, but you can't really just go in and just put one thing up. You've got to be able to control what that thing is. So we need to find a way of controlling our visuals. Now I can do this with my laptop's keyboard, so I can just pick up on keyboard events, I can change the visuals that are going on, I can think about changing different parameters in the visuals, but I am just pressing keys. It's not the best way of controlling things. I did actually do some experiments around using the Gamepad API, but I found it to be quite flaky. I mean, I tried 3 different gamepads before I could even find one that worked with the API. MIDI. Okay. So let me tell you some stuff about MIDI. MIDI is not those bleeping noises that you hear when you think about MIDI. MIDI is just data being passed between electronic instruments. There was a rise in popularity of these instruments in the 70s. They were first invented in the 50s. And they were taking them into recording studios, and they were they had the recording equipment, and they had all these electronic instruments, but they had no way of talking to each other. And so industry experts and music instrument manufacturers all got together, and they were like, wouldn't it be good if we just had a protocol, considering they're all electric, a protocol where they could all just talk to each other. And so they did. They invented MIDI. 1983, the first specification came out, General MIDI 1. We now work with General MIDI 2, which is a bit like a leap between HTML4 and HTML5. It's just a little bit better. There's lots of actual other MIDI specs as well. There's things like a Bluetooth low-energy MIDI spec, and polyphony, which is touching things in different ways. It's really, really interesting when you start to get into it, although now I sound like a geek. MIDI is really interesting, and we now have it on the web, right? I could just do a whole talk about MIDI. This is a MIDI instrument. Now, an instrument has onboard audio. And you play this, I'm sure you've probably all seen keyboards, I'm sure you've already played them. When you press a key, it has audio, so you can play it standalone. But the thing is, it's MIDI enabled, so you can take it into a recording studio, or you can take it into, I don't know, have it with an orchestra, and you can play it with, oh, I wasn't allowed to talk about orchestration. Goodness me. Okay, well, oh well, never mind. Thanks, talk. Never mind. We'll figure it out later. That's a MIDI instrument. You can play it standalone, but you can actually talk to other instruments with it. What we're more likely to use on the web is something like this. This is a MIDI controller. It is just kind of a box of buttons that sends MIDI events and MIDI data. There's no onboard audio. I haven't spoken about synths, but if you come and grab me after, I can give you that lecture as well. This one you see here is a Novation Launchpad. I'm sure you've probably heard of them. You might have even seen them. They're quite popular when it comes to developers. And you basically plug them in via USB into your computer. You run some Web MIDI code, which I've got in a minute, actually. Web MIDI code, you just request access to it, run the loop, and every single time you press one of the pads, you will get some numbers, and then you just trigger whatever you want from those numbers. And it's not just pads as well. You've got CC controls. So you've got things like sliders and dials and things like that. And that's a really, really good way of controlling things. I have got a MIDI controller with me today. This is my handbag MIDI controller, because it's my smallest one. This actually runs over Bluetooth, so I connect it to my laptop via Bluetooth, and then I run this code in the browser, and it will send data to the browser. This is a minim, for those of you that are interested, because some people ask me that every single time I do this talk. With any luck, we have a demo. So for those of you that can see, we've got buttons that we can press on it. It's also got a slider here that I can use for mixing. So if I slide up and down, it can actually mix the visuals. What I actually tend to code into the software is that is a really, really simple example. It's a little bit more complicated than that because I tend to mix on the beat. So I've got some beat analysis going on, and then when you mix, it all kind of flashes, and it's nice. But the thing is, you can put sort of controls on the other buttons as well, so you can put effects on them. These buttons here can choose all the different things that you might want to show. And you know, you can get bigger controllers, you can have sliders, different effects. There's loads of stuff you can do with MIDI. And it's not just visuals. I mean, most people play sounds with it, so you make sounds with the audio API, and then you press the buttons on a MIDI controller, and they'll make sounds. But if you want to hardware enable your browser, I highly recommend this. MIDI controllers are very affordable as well. My first one, I think, was about €35. So yeah, get on that. Whew. Is any of this real? Seems a bit strange, doesn't it? Making sort of flashy things like in Chrome, bearing in mind that I do actually run this in Chrome, and then buying a box of like lights and then just pressing all the buttons and having them all trigger. This is me with my portable VJ kit. So everything's pretty small these days. So I came up with this idea a couple of years ago where I've got a little pocket projector. It's only probably about as big as this minim. And I made a little pack with my laptop and a bag, and I kind of hold it like an usherette tray, and the projector projects out the bottom of the bag, and I just go around with my laptop, and you can just project onto the streets. It's me projecting onto the streets of my city. I wrote an article about this, and some people got in touch with me over the web, the interwebs. Pretty cool place, by the way, if you haven't discovered it. And they were like, yeah, we're doing this too. And I was like, really? That's crazy. And they weren't just doing things like making visuals, they were making sounds, they were doing music software, all just with the audio API, the MIDI API, and JavaScript. All running, maybe not in Chrome, maybe in like Chrome sort of native desktop software, Words, Ruth. Oh, it's near the end of the day. And we sort of all got together because we were really cool. We really wanted to talk to each other about it because we didn't really know anybody else that was doing it. And now we have a little collective. This is us. You can find us online. You can come and talk to us about it. And we don't really make any money. We're just there, and we're just a community. We all do different things. We either do projections and visuals. Martin actually controls lighting systems with his software. So it's all runs from like MIDI to DMX, which is almost like the MIDI protocol for lighting systems. So those big lights that you get in venues, he runs those. You've got Matt, who's built a whole piece of music software where he actually DJs with all of this. Tim runs bubble machines and smoke machines and controls all of that with MIDI. It's crazy. And then Sam just plays stuff. It's great. Yeah. We just play gigs, so we just run JavaScript software on our laptops and play live. If you need to find out more, we do actually have a GitHub organisation with all our code in. If you are interested, it's all there. That must mean it's real, because, you know, GitHub.org, that's a stamp of authority right there. There is one thing I really want to address before we all go for beer, though. And I'm sure you've all noticed as you've all been sitting there, because you're all pretty keen-eyed, right? Duct tape, workarounds, bike shedding, and coffee? Yeah, of course it was there, of course it was. Yeah, the whole thing, like my whole portable VJ pack is obviously held together with duct tape, obviously. Ben's on a bike. I mean, come on. This whole function here is obviously a workaround. And drinking coffee. I know. Most useful talk ever. Thank you very much.